Hey everybody, how you doing? I am making this vlog to clear up some misinformation that's out there, put out there by my friend, the good Oakland District 4 Councilmember Janani Ramachandran. And she put out earlier today a live stream on vlog on her Instagram account, which really, for want of a better term, throws up some falsehoods that have to be addressed. And so what I'm going to do is, in an effort to really clear the air here, is make a video about, or a counter video, if you will, about what happened. Now, here's, before I start with the sort of side-by-side with John Lee's explanation here, and what I say, let me explain to you my history in this, because I'm now 63 years old, and I'm older, I think pretty much than most of the people that have been involved in this now. Unfortunately, a number of people have passed on, so it's really my duty to explain to everybody exactly how we got into this mess. First of all, the Oakland Army Base closed. I was on the Oakland, actually the organization called the Base Realignment and Closure Committee, and that was in 1994. I was placed there by Alameda County Supervisor Keith Carson, and the bases were set to be closed after an effort that involved, in large part, the work of the late Oakland mayor, and prior to that, great Oakland congressman in Washington, Ron Dellums, who believed that it was time for us, since the Cold War was over, to start winding down our military bases and military vehicles and turning them over for civilian use wherever possible. So, long story short, one of the closure targets was the Oakland Army Base, and of course the legendary Alameda Naval Air Station. And so the government sought a redevelopment strategy for all communities nationwide, that it would replace the low-skilled but well-paying jobs with their private sector equivalents wherever possible. And in the Oakland case, that formed a competition for the development of what was called Oakland Army Base land. One of the people who entered that was my longtime friend Phil Tagami. I met Phil thanks to the late Oakland Citizens Committee for Urban Renewal Executive Director David Glover, who brought us together and said, "You two brothers are a lot alike. You all should get to know each other. You're involved." And he was right. We became fast friends. That was in 1991 at Oakland, sharing the vision. Then Phil lobbied to rebuild the rotunda, was rejected many times over a 10-year period by the city of Oakland. Finally, to make a long story short, got a breakthrough when Oakland Mayor Larry Hugh Harris and myself as economic advisor, and John Russo, and Oakland City Manager Robert Bobb, and Kofi Bonner as interim, and others, approved Phil's right to establish California Capital Investment Group. It had a different name then, and rebuild the rotunda to rave reviews nationwide. And it put Phil on the map as an adaptive reuse developer, something that he wanted to be for some time. So Phil then set his sights on the Fox Theater, but he was a fee developer consultant to the city of Oakland. And for anybody that has visited the Fox and went to concerts like, well, you name the great concerts that have been there. I think of David Byrne and the Talking Heads. Others may have their favorites, but there's no question but that the Fox Theater has become a centerpiece facility in Oakland's culture. Phil then set his sights on something bigger, and that was the opportunity to develop a meaningful project at the Oakland Army Base. He competed against people like the Wayans brothers. The Wayans brothers were thought of for a time to be the favorites because they wanted to build movie studios. But Phil won out because Phil's proposal was the only one that was based on replacing the jobs that were lost. Remember, the low-skilled but high-paying jobs that were lost were their equivalent in the fashion of something called the Oakland Bulk and Oversized Terminal, and OBOT. And so that's how Phil won the contract. So Phil was partnered with the City of Oakland. And on that point right here, I will stop and I will start Janani's video, and I will stop the video to correct what she says at various points through it. So here she is right here, and I adjusted the volume so that you could hear her and then me at the same time. So here is the great Councilmember Ramachandran. I hope she doesn't take this personally, but I've been around this much longer, and I say to everybody in Oakland, look, we've all have had significant involvement in Oakland as it has come to be built to this point, and we need to talk to each other rather than, some council members feeling like, well, we are younger and it's our turn or anything else. That's not helpful to anybody. And when I'm finished, I'm certain you'll agree. Here we go.
Hey, the City of Oakland just got hit with some pretty upsetting news this week. We are about to owe potentially up to $600 million because of a lawsuit happening in Kentucky. Hey, what's going on? Let's rewind. So, why do we owe all this money? Back over a decade ago in 2013, City Council and City of Oakland effectively made a pretty bad deal. We agreed to, well, sorry, not we, I wasn't on council at the time. The council agreed to come up with an agreement to lease some city-owned property by the waterfront in West Oakland.
And this, I'll stop it here. This is where Janani is wrong. She totally leaves out the fact that the land that's the focus of discussion here was the Oakland Army Base land that was the centerpiece of a competition, a developer competition that Phil Tagami / Oakland Bulk and Oversized Terminal, where they had partnered with A&B Realty to develop a bulk terminal. And not only that, I forgot to mention something in my preamble. The idea of the Oakland Bulk and Oversized Terminal originally came from the same Oakland Sharing the Vision event where I met Phil. It was the #1 economic development priority voted on by 2,000 people who attended that event during October of 1991, October 11th, I believe, 1991. And again, I was there. David Glover, the now late executive director of Oakland Citizens Committee for Urban Renewal, introduced us. So that's where Phil's idea came from. It was basically finishing the work that was started at Oakland Sharing the Vision, what Phil would jokingly refer to as Oakland Sharing the Ham Sandwich. But that's where it came from. And prior to that, in 1986, the Bay Seaport Plan called for the Port of Oakland to build a bulk terminal. So the bulk terminal has been the apple, the gleam, the dream of a number of Port of Oakland fans and aficionados and proponents like the late Richard Winnie, the great Alameda County Council who was a mentor of mine and wanted me actually to run Oakland Sharing the Vision. That's another story. So Janani doesn't understand the history, but that's the real history. And that's where Phil got the idea from. And because of the involvement of the federal government with respect to, in the form of the military and its edict regarding wanting to see low-skilled but high-paying jobs replaced with their equivalent, was heavily involved in who won the development and why, and set the tone for forming the raison d'etre, the selection points that led to Phil winning the competition. In other words, in lay terms, Phil picked the right idea that theoretically at least would produce the kind of job outcome the government sought. And that's what happened. Let me continue. So it wasn't by, she mentions 2013. That's another important point. 2013 is when the development agreement was signed. And something else too. During that time, in that year, I interviewed Fred Blackwell, who is the director of redevelopment. It's here at Zenny62 YouTube. And in that 13-minute video, Fred Blackwell, in working with Phil, called the Oakland bulk and oversized terminal a gift. His words, not mine, a gift. This is on video. A gift to the environmental community. Why? Because the plan from the start was to use covered rail cars. Covered rail cars. And Phil's plan from the start was to achieve a low emissions result out of the construction of the bulk of this bulk terminal. Coal was, and Johnny is right here, one of a number of commodities that was to be hauled. But what she's not going to explain to you, because either she's leaving it out or doesn't know, is that the City of Oakland and OBOT were contractual partners, and the City of Oakland was represented by Pat Cashman. Pat Cashman is also the same person who hired me to work as an intern to the Oakland Redevelopment Agency in 1980, late 1987, September 16th specifically. Later in life, I was invited to dinner by my godparents, the late Barbara Schock and Bob Schock, because they had a surprise guest who wanted to talk with me. It was Pat Cashman, and that was in 2019. And Pat Cashman, actually 2020, and Pat Cashman wanted to tell me that my assertions regarding Oakland's involvement in the selection of coal were absolutely right, and that Oakland did sign the development agreement with coal on it, and then tried to cover it up. Do you understand? Then tried to cover it up. Why? Because Tom Steyer, once a coal investor, but later and a hedge fund investor, saw a future where clean energy was king and believed that he could get out in front of it and indeed push to make it happen by seeding millions of dollars through the California legislature and California politics, not to mention national politicians, and make money, divert public money toward the support and toward the advancement of clean energy as opposed to fossil fuels. And so, locally in Oakland, a number of elected officials, within Oakland Mayor Libby Schaff, for example, received many thousands of dollars from Tom Steyer and his wife, Kat Taylor, along the lines of making absolutely certain that they were advancing a clean energy future. But on the way toward that, rather than say, hey, Phil, we'd like to partner with you and help you achieve your objective of clean energy, they tried to essentially eliminate the project, as opposed to dealing with the fact that, hey, they signed a contract which allowed the use of and the hauling of many different minerals. Iron ore is dirtier than coal, 7 times dirtier. But the only reason elected officials focused on coal was because Tom Steyer focused on it, and it was a bigger market than iron ore, and therefore, because they were involved, of course, media hotlight pointed to that as opposed to the truth regarding what mineral was the dirtiest. Okay, so that's the truth regarding the project before Janani and right up to 2013. Oakland. The point is that Oakland knew that coal was part of the mix in 2013, and as did in 2014. But after the project reached the hot light of the public, it tried to lie about it and say, "Oh, we didn't know about coal until 2015." Let's continue.
To a big developer that wanted to set up a bulk commodity terminal to basically involve the shipment of goods of a lot of different kinds.
Let me stop here. A big developer is not Phil. Phil is not a big developer. Interesting that she thinks Phil is a big developer, but the point of the fact is that Phil was actually a small local developer, and has been, who has achieved a measure of fame from the projects that I mentioned. But Phil is not a big developer. And for Janani to present Phil that way and not mention that Phil's a proud product of Oakland Public Schools, Skyline High School, friends of mine, friends of Libby's, everybody else's, is really shameful. And Janani, you really owe Phil an apology from there.
The things, including the potential of coal. A couple of years later, activists raised their voices and said, hey, we really don't want coal in Oakland because of all of the health and equity and various things that very much might come from the transportation of coal in Oakland. So then City Council said, you know what? We're going to pass a resolution that says no coal in Oakland, which is great, and I fully support that. However, the developers sued the city multiple times. There's been over a dozen lawsuits in this.
And this is where Janani does not mention that the real basis of the lawsuit was that Oakland agreed. She's right. Oakland, she kind of says it but doesn't say it. But what she doesn't say is that, either again because she doesn't know or she's trying to cover it up, but that Oakland signed a contract. And I have a copy of the development agreement, which in pen actually writes out the original one, the breakdown of the commodities, including coal. But then it wasn't a big issue to anybody until Tom Steyer made it an issue, and she leaves that out. She tries to make the activists look like the big heroes, but that wasn't what happened. The activists that got involved were actually fueled by Tom Steyer's money themselves. So it was really Tom Steyer that ignited the objections and this hyper-political behavior that still exists to this day. So Janani either is leaving that out or not. Now, having said that, some of you will say, well, Zenny, weren't you paid by Inside Terminal Solutions? And my answer is yes, proudly. In fact, I sought after Inside Terminal Solutions as a client for reputation management, and the simple reason was that I knew the city was lying. I had a history with it. Phil and I both have been involved with this bulk terminal from our perspective positions as advocates for it, not working for anybody, just simply advocates for something that the Port of Oakland had needed for a long, long time, for some time, and we wanted to see that thus got done. And I wanted to see Phil get that project because he had a plan to do it and nobody else cared, which really is the other operative term here. A lot of people don't do anything to push Oakland along to really make it for it so that it advances for others. And so there are a number of instances when someone has a great idea, but there are people who really get involved in stopping it, really because they're upset that, well, in Phil's case, he had the vision to go after it and the courage to go after it, even though he may not have had the right mix of people to work with. He would alter that. In the case of the Oakland Oversized terminal, Janani says that developers, and there were different combinations. Well, let me help you out with that, Janani. Phil originally partnered with Kinder Morgan. Kinder Morgan, before ITS, Inside Terminal Solutions, Kinder Morgan made a promise, a contractual promise to Phil, that it would employ covered rail cars in the transport of coal. This is very important because that would cap the emissions, negative emissions problem, frankly, and help Phil achieve his objective of zero emissions. To top that off, Phil had plans for a type of rail operations, called OGRE, Oakland Rail. I forgot what the acronym stands for, but the idea in then also called for a low emission locomotive to be used. See, Phil gets no credit for trying to produce a low emissions transport system. The city could have been a great economic development partner and said, you know what, Phil, we love this. Let's determine a way we use tax increment financing to help you so that you can lessen, we can lessen the impact by you not hauling so much coal to help us politically. And we can develop this as a true bulk terminal. And we can also, where coal comes in, help you in your objective of minimizing the emissions transport to zero. But the city never even talked that way at all. Never treated Phil as a partner once the, if you will, coal cat was out of the bag, for want of a better term. All right, let's continue.
Whole case. And a federal court ruled that actually the city of Oakland has no say on whether or not this developer can transport coal. Federal law trumps, and I hate to use that word these days.
And she's wrong. All right? Again, Janani fails to mention the breach of contract issue. Again, the city of Oakland lied about its knowledge of coal being one of the commodities to be hauled. It did know it. It signed a development agreement to that end. And the city of Oakland, and the reason why I wanted to be a client, reputation management client for Inside Terminal Solutions, and why I pursued such a relationship, was because, first of all, I knew I would have to get those documents out of court. They were sealed. And I wanted to digitize them from PDF to HTML. That takes time. All of the work that I did takes time to do. I had to have my own servers, which of course would be cyber attacked and everything else. So this idea that, you know, these so-called other media types have, who don't own their own media production systems, they work for somebody else, who don't know how to code, who don't understand search engine optimization, I can go on and on and on. They were trying to evaluate what I did from the tiny little window of knowledge that they have versus mine, which is absolutely ridiculous. Okay? Absolutely ridiculous. And also, they were paid by political operatives who wanted to advance what they considered to be a progressivite line of being anti-Oakland Bulk and Oversized Terminal. I don't consider it progressive at all. To me, a really progressive thought is, how do you take this and use genius engineering, the Oakland Bulk and Oversized Terminal, to use genius engineering and technology to truly make it zero emissions? That, to me, is progressive. That, to me, is Bay Area. That, to me, is Oakland. The way they did it is Luddite. It's, oh, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to care. You know, they just want to be in their little caves and everything. That's how I think of them. Let me continue.
And basically, the city of Oakland, you can't say they can't do it. Long story short, the city of Oakland tries to stall the project in other ways, saying we don't want coal in Oakland, we don't want coal in Oakland, so we're going to...
And she's right. The city of Oakland tried to stall the project. And that's where the breach of contract came in. All right? That's where the breach of contract came in. Stalling the project, and she just admitted it right there. Stalling the project meant the city of Oakland was trying to deny access to the land from Phil and his team, representing what's called the Oakland Bulk and Oversized Terminal. Now, the Oakland Bulk and Oversized Terminal had, remember that I mentioned Kinder Morgan? Kinder Morgan lied And so Phil fired Kinder Morgan and hired Inside Terminal Solutions, represented by John Siegel, who's in Louisville, Kentucky. So he was like, how did this wind up in a Louisville, Kentucky bankruptcy court? Well, because Inside Terminal Solutions was really there. That's where John had his offices. And so, at any rate, OBOT couldn't get access to the land, and Inside Terminal Solutions, they also couldn't. And OBOT and Inside Terminal Solutions have a lease agreement relationship. ITS, Inside Terminal Solutions, is leasing from OBOT for the right to actually be the developer for the Oakland bulk and oversized terminal. Okay? So the city of Oakland made two errors. A, one, a breach of contract, its own contract, and then tortious interference with the city of with the Oakland bulk and oversized terminal relationship, lease relationship with Inside Terminal Solutions. Understand? So Janani is right. The city did all kinds of, well, illegal things. And this is where, and I wrote, and I'll say, there are some people who assert to this day that certain political operatives within the city should have been in jail by now. I'll continue.
Do whatever we can to stop this project from really happening. The problem is the developer...
No, whatever we can. She said it. You heard it. Whatever we can to stop the project.
Sued the city again multiple times. In 2023, an Alameda County court judge ruled that, guess what, the city's work interfered in this contract and prevented the developers from making the money that they could have on this project.
And it wasn't the city's work. Yeah, she left out the sentence. She deliberately cut it off. The city's work in trying to scuttle the project, trying to deny access to the land. Tortious interference. That's where the tort came in. But also, remember, the city is continuing a breach of contract with the developer. The city of Oakland signed the development agreement that said that coal and other commodities would be hauled in this bulk terminal. And the bulk terminal was never designed to store coal. It is not a coal terminal. Indeed, the city of Oakland and the Oakland Bulk and Oversized Terminal did reach an agreement to build the Oakland Bulk and Oversized Terminal, but not haul coal. But what did the city do? By that time, the city didn't want Phil to build that at all, period. They wanted to sell the land to somebody else. They were trying to push Phil out of the way entirely. Really dastardly stuff, okay? And this is what you're seeing here, and what I'm telling you, is where the rubber meets the road and how the city of Oakland really works. It's done it for a long time. No one has said, hey, you know what? You need to stop being dishonest and start treating people with the respect that they deserve by law, and working with people that maybe you don't necessarily want to work with, but follow the agreements that you make and make it so that when you sign something, you can be trusted. The city has a long history in a number of situations of behavior similar to this. There is a reason we're here, folks, and it's not pretty.
We appealed. Appeals court said the same thing. California Supreme Court said the same thing. And basically, we're stuck.
Yeah,
the developers can and might, I don't know their plans, to ship coal, you know.
And see, this is where Janani is stuck. The city had an agreement with Oakland Bulk and Oversized Terminal not to ship coal. The city reneged on that. So Janani is so stuck in the whole coal thing that she just stopped there and didn't, either she didn't study what was going on, which I think is it. And look, Janani is really smart. This is why I'm saying this in this way, because she's smart enough not to do that. And she's smart enough to really absorb these details if she wants to. But she believes that not to not do so is politically damaging to her, and it's not. She could save a lot of people a lot of trouble by just advancing the truth.
Oakland. Now, what's up with Kentucky? So in this process, this is a whole long, complicated history. I'm going to make it as condensed as I can. The company, the developers, there's so many people exchanging hands. There's multiple companies involved. One of the big ones involved goes bankrupt. And they blame it on Oakland, saying all the millions of dollars that we could have earned through this project, we lost out and now we're bankrupt. And they sued in a Kentucky bankruptcy court. That bankruptcy court just this past week said, guess what, Oakland, you are responsible for a huge part of the reason this company went bankrupt and are on the hook for a lot of money. Now, the city's own experts estimate that the lower range of what we might owe is over $230 million. The developers claim it's close to $700 million. Whatever the case is, the city is, of course, going to fight it, going to appeal, going to try to continue to fight it as much as possible because we don't want to pay. But the way things are going in this case, since we've lost, so many lawsuits at this point related to this whole case, is that we're probably going to be on the hook for several $100 million. And coal can legally still be shipped in Oakland when this terminal is fully constructed. So this is all to say, the city has done all it can to try to stop coal being transported in Oakland. We really have. We've been to every court of law that will hear us out. At this point, it's up to the community. It's up to people who might chain themselves to the railway saying, you won't transport coal in Oakland over our dead bodies. I don't know what's going to happen. And it's probably a few years away from actually happening soon.
But this is what's so stupid. Again, the city had a deal with the Oakland Bulk and Oversized Terminal that included a non-transport clause regarding coal, but the city reneged on it. So when Janani is telling you to stop and chain it, this is Luddite. I want to be a 1960s activist, civil rights, what she thinks is civil rights, behavior, as opposed to economic development, which is deal making. You don't hear any sentence at all, none, that points to deal making. In other words, coming to an agreement with the quote opposing party and therefore not making them opposing our party anymore. And that is why we're in economic development trouble in many ways. It's this, I want what I want, but I don't want to understand what you want. I want to go with what I think as opposed to the truth. And Janani is sadly representing that, and I really believed she was smarter than that, and I still believe she is. The city has to get out of this form of behavior. It seems like whoever we wind up electing to sit in the chair of the city council essentially behaves like the person they replaced. We have to advance, and we're not doing it. And she has to show some desire to really understand the history of the project, warts and all, and say, what kind of deal can we realize from this that's a win-win? She has to establish that language. The city has to establish that language rather than turning around and saying, we're just going to keep appealing this and spending your money. We know we're going to lose. We're just going to keep doing it anyway. That's stupid. Here.
But this is one of those really tricky situations where the city's done what it can. We've listened to the voices of community, but this is the way the world works in our capitalist society, and ultimately, it was the city over a decade ago that made a pretty bad deal, and now we're stuck with the consequences.
And it's not, look, capitalism, this is what really bothers me. She represents government. Government is as much a part of this society as anything else. Our society is not perfectly capitalist. We have a price mechanism. That is really what government is. We have two things, price mechanism and a democracy. Within that, that's why we have courts. Courts are not so much to just tell you what you can and cannot do. They also serve as places where people can make deals and agreements to move forward. We also have economic development. We had redevelopment. We used tax increment financing, but this group, doesn't want to listen to it, and it's hearing people who say, well, if I use redevelopment, I will take taxpayer money away from the general fund. Actually, that's not true. When you use redevelopment, we used to call redevelopment, now we call it enhanced infrastructure financing district legislation. That money is still controlled by the city through this company called the Public Financing Authority. The city, normally when you pay $1 property tax to the city, that revenue comes only partly to the Oakland's general fund to the tune of 22%. The rest goes to BART, AC Transit, the school district, the county of Alameda, and the EB Mud Flood Control District. But when you use enhanced infrastructure financing district legislation, the city, through the Public Financing Authority, keeps 100% of it, and they can take part of that and put it to the general fund for security or whatever is in its plan that's covered by law. And that is a long list of uses, like, for example, fire stations and rehabilitation of businesses damaged by the pandemic, according to AB 464 Mullen. Janani, know the law. Know what is possible. You are, I believe, a trained attorney. I am not a trained attorney, but I was told I would be a very good one if I went to law school. At any rate, let's continue with Janani's statement.
So I'll share more information as I hear it. Maybe there's a silver lining. Maybe there's good news in the future. But right now, this is what it is.
Janani, there is a silver lining. The silver lining is for the city of Oakland to mea culpa, to do economic development, come up with a whole new development that essentially works to get the city its money back in a different way, because you will wind up paying inside terminal solutions. And also, for all this talk about wanting to restructure government and go get away from Jerry Brown's form of government. Prior to that, we had the council manager form of government. We really should be talking about the fact that it doesn't matter what kind of structured government we have. We still have these problems. I've worked in both. Okay? And until we get to the real nitty-gritty of why we get into these situations, which has to do with not having proper work rules, which has to do with not having a vision for the city, which has to do with attracting people who work for the city, but they don't care about the city so much as they care about their own pockets. And this has gone on for decades. We need to have a come-to-Jesus discussion about what really makes up Oakland government. And we have not had it. Okay? And we're still not having it. And we need to move forward. Subscribe to Zenny62 on YouTube and bookmark ZennyReport.com. Thank you. Thank you, Janani.